Hello, shalom and marhaban. You're listening to Yalla, the podcast which works to combat lies, confront misconceptions, and hopefully, if I've done my job, challenge you to think deeper about things. I'm Amie, your friendly neighborhood biblical resource writer, and I'm so happy you've chosen to spend some time with me today. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to His Name Became Israel. What is this? Episode 13. So this is part 3. I hope y'all had or you are having a very Tov Pesach, depending on how fast I get this episode posted, and had a wonderful Easter celebration, the celebration of the ultimate blessing bestowed upon humanity. And what a wonderful segue into what could be called the beginning of that long-awaited promise, the blessing brought about by Israel. So let's jump right into it, shall we? Let's talk about that ancient Semite, the one who would be called Israel once again, Yaakov, or Jacob, the heir apparent. Now, if you've been following along this far, I think we can safely say together, this is not the kind of man any human would build a promise on. He lies, he cheats, he takes what isn't his, and somehow he becomes the heir of Abraham. Well, here we are once again. And y'all, I thought this was going to be the final chapter. Are any of you actually surprised? The moment where Jacob fully steps into the promise, where everything comes together. But the more I sat with the text, the more it became clear we're not there yet. Because before Jacob becomes Israel, there's a lot more tension. We've got sisters now who share a husband, who then share that husband with their concubines, making up the mothers of the future tribes of Israel. There's family drama galore, as you can imagine, both immediate and extended, because Jacob's twin Esau is about to come back into the picture as well, and the land of promise is about to be lived in again. Now, before this, though, there will come a night where Jacob, Yaakov, the cheater, will be forced to reconcile his past and submit before inheriting the land. But we've got lots more to get to before this to really understand what's going on and the significance of all of this. And here's part of the reason I want to slow down. Because as popular as Israel, the country, is right now, with propaganda and bad theological ideas swirling about from the social media gods, it means there is a responsibility for us to be good stewards of history, of what these ancient authors wrote, of truth, and to stop and ponder these things. So today, we slow down. Because in truth, we've barely scratched the surface of this man. If Jacob's life were a mountain, I've handed you a few pebbles. Important ones, yes, but still just pebbles. I know I went a little philosophical there, but I'm sticking with the analogy. Over the last 2 episodes, those pebbles have painted a pretty clear picture. Jacob is not the obvious choice. Again, he's a deceiver, a manipulator, a man who takes what isn't his, at least at the appointed times. And yet, he walks away with a blessing. No, that's not quite right. He walks away with the blessing for himself, for Israel, and for the world. So what does this do? Well, now we're left with a question that sits right at the center of all of this. Why would God choose him? Now, before you rush to answer me in your car or walk or while you're making dinner, I'd really like us to sit with this question. In this episode, we're stepping into something deeper, not just the story of Yaakov, but the reality that God does not choose the way we do. And that's more significant than we think. It is my hope that as we uncover more pebbles, this episode will illuminate why it matters that God chose who he did and what it reveals about him. Jacob's story is a story of extended grace over and over. It's a continuous, amazing grace given to the person Israel that foreshadows the grace offered to the world. But I'm once again getting way too ahead of myself. Now, this portion of Jacob's story is incredibly rich and dense, like stepping into a thick, crowded forest with a flickering flashlight, trying to see as much as we can along the way. There are so many moments we could spend entire episodes on, but here I'll skim some of the side paths intentionally, keeping our focus on Jacob and the promise, though honestly, some of that weird stuff is where I love to linger, maybe later. So we left off with Rebecca being told of Esau's plan to kill Jacob. Curious, huh? Another spy? She tells Jacob, Hey son, remember what you did under my direction, lying to your father and stealing Esau's blessing? Well, he's mad now, so I need you to jump ship because he super duper wants to kill you. That was the AAV, the American Amie version. And Rebecca is having none of it. Let's review that section. Then we'll head north to her brother Laban, who, spoiler, isn't all that different from his nephew Jacob. Before I do, though, as a side note, I tend to create a hybrid out of the names. I autocorrect myself from the Hebrew into the English for names and places. So I believe, what do we say in English? Laban in the South. His name is actually Lavan, the word for white. So I'm creating kind of a hybrid. I'm saying Laban. I tend to do that with the names at times. So I'll try to correct myself. But if I do that with Yaakov, Avraham, and Lavan, Slicha ani mitzeret, please excuse me. I'm not trying to. So anyhow, in Genesis 27, verses 43 through 46, from the ESV, it says this: Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Lavan, my brother in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me? Honestly, this has a My Big Fat Greek Wedding vibe to me. Remember when Aunt Vula and Tula's mother tried to trick Tula's father into sending her to school? They manipulate him at the restaurant. That's what Rebekah is essentially doing, using her dislike of Esau's local wives to push Isaac into sending Yaakov north. Probably true to some extent, but it's still a strategy on her part. So Jacob is sent away intentionally back to Padan Aram, to the household of his mother's family. This isn't random. This is strategic. This is covenantal. He's being guided to marry within the same line that carries the promise, the same lineage tied all the way back to Abraham. But don't miss the cost of that obedience. Padan Aram isn't just a short trip. We're talking roughly 400 to 500 miles from Canaan. That's about a month-long journey on foot. In today's terms, Jacob is leaving the land of Israel and traveling all the way up into what we would now call northern Mesopotamia, modern-day Syria, or southeastern Turkey maybe, near a place known historically as Haran. Meanwhile, Canaan, where he's coming from, corresponds now obviously to what we know of as Israel and some of the surrounding regions. So this isn't just a family visit. This is exile. This is distance. This is stepping away from everything familiar, because the promise matters that much. And while Jacob, heads north, back to the roots of the covenant, Esau is moving in the opposite direction. He sees that his previous marriages displeased his parents, but even in his attempt to gain approval, he misses the heart of what's happening, and the text quietly makes something clear. One brother is aligning himself with the promise, marrying within the family line, and the other, despite his efforts, is drifting further from it. But don't forget that God still has his hand on Esau. And then in the next chapter, almost like a whisper from the past, we hear a familiar name for God, El Shaddai, a name for God which pulls us all the way back to Genesis 17, to the moment God revealed himself as God Almighty, establishing his covenant with Abraham, marked by circumcision, declaring an everlasting promise. So in this scene, we're holding all three timelines at once. The past, the covenant spoken over Abraham. The present, Jacob being sent away to preserve that promise. And the future, which will be carried through the children born from these unions. And just like that, marriage becomes more than personal. It becomes prophetic. But before we get to Padan Aram, to Jacob's uncle in the east, I want to bring our attention to one thing in chapter 28. The moment Jacob lies his head near a rock. Now, most English translations will have that under his head, but in the Hebrew it's worded a little bit differently, but anyhow. And Jacob has a dream, and his dream is this: there is a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reaches heaven. There are angels using it to ascend to heaven and to descend to earth. And the Lord is standing above it, and he says to Jacob in verses 13 through 15, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in you and in your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Now, in the past, we have Jacob referring to the Lord as his father's God. Here is a kind of turning point. Remember, God chose Yaakov, Jacob, while he was still in his mother's womb. And now it becomes personal. God speaks, not vaguely, not symbolically, but clearly, personally, directly. And listen closely, because what he says, he repeats. Your descendants will spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. Spread. That word matters because it's the start of a type of reversal of something much older and darker. Listen to this. Back at Babel, humanity was scattered, divided, dispersed. But here, God uses that same idea and redeems it. This isn't scattering in judgment. This is spreading and blessing. What was once confusion becomes multiplication. And then he says it again, just in a different way. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Do you hear that layering? Spread, bless, spread, bless. It's not random, it's intentional. God is reinforcing something into Jacob, something Jacob will have to hold on to when everything feels uncertain. And then comes the line, I am with you. Not once, not casually. This is a theme, a thread, a promise repeated across generations. I am with you. He said it before to Isaac. He'll say it again to Moses, to Joshua, to prophets, to people in exile. I am with you. Because everything that follows depends on that. I will watch over you wherever you go. Wherever. Not just in the land, not just in the promise, but in the in-between, in the running, in the exile, in the unknown. Jacob is about to walk hundreds of miles away from everything familiar, but he cannot outwalk the presence of God. And I will bring you back. Again, that's not a suggestion. That's a promise set in motion. Even when Jacob doesn't know the way back, God already does. And I will not leave you. Not leave, not abandon. That word for leave or abandon is azav. It carries the weight of covenantal loyalty. It's the kind of leaving that breaks relationship, the kind that says, I'm done with you. And God says, I will not do that, which is almost ironic because Jacob, he just left. He left the land that he would inherit. He left everything that looked like the promise and ran for his life. And for a moment, it looks like Esau, the one without the blessing, is the one who ended up with everything. So what does Jacob actually have? No land, no security, no idea of what the immediate future holds. Just a word, just a promise. And that's the tension, because from this moment on, Jacob is going to live in the gap between what God said and what he can see for 20 years, waiting, working, wrestling through life, holding on to faith in Yahweh. Now let's stop for a moment because it's time for a mini tangent. I think I've kind of spelled this out, but I want to reiterate something here. I think it's fair to say that Jacob is not a simple man. His circumstances are messy, and they are about to get a lot messier, full of family conflict, but God knows this. It's not a surprise. And if we pause, we see something astounding. The prophetic being woven through what seems chaotic. Now, remember for a second here, as funny as this sounds, it's worth a reminder. Jacob doesn't see the ending. He doesn't know about David, Samuel, Esther, Jeremiah, Matthew, or Paul. All he has is a multifold promise, bigger than he can imagine. And that's exactly how God works. The story of Jacob carries forward through the Bible and into eternity. That's a big statement, but worth pausing to take in. So as we continue, think of this ancient Near Eastern man, Jacob, Yaakov, and the accounts of blessing, descendants spreading north, south, east, and west, land and covenantal protection through Yahweh. And these promises are sealed and stamped with a name change. And that name change will become a nation that will bless all nations. Israel. But more on that soon. Okay, back to the story. Now, Jacob builds a life in Haran, truly spending no less than 20 years working for his uncle, Laban. He works 7 years for one daughter's hand in marriage and is fooled by his uncle, who gives him his oldest daughter, Leah, instead of his younger daughter, Rachel, whom Jacob loved deeply. If that wasn't enough, Laban makes him work another 7 years for Rachel and another 6 working as a shepherd for his uncle. So to give a sort of synopsis here, Jacob has 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. Rachel he loved, and Leah, well, not so much. After 7 years, thinking he was working for Rachel, he is given Leah. Then after another 7 years, he was given Rachel. Now, as can be imagined, these two are constantly feuding, but in the midst of this give birth to sons. They also have their concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah, contribute to Jacob's offspring. Let's create the top of Jacob's family tree here, just to give an idea of the drama that will ensue in Jacob's life. Okay, here we go. So Leah, Jacob's first wife, first gives birth to Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah. Excuse me, we say Levi, don't we? I'm doing it again. This is going to be tricky for me. Okay, so she gives birth to Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah. Then Rachel is jealous and says to Jacob rather dramatically, "Do your job and give me kids or I'll die." I love that, or I'll die. And Jacob says, I'm not God. And then Rachel says, okay, well, here's my servant Bilhah. Make her pregnant so that I can have kids through her. Just as a side note, these passages make me so glad that God's love is nothing like humans and that he sees people and his heart is for people. Bilhah gives birth to Dan and Naphtali. Rachel's now content for the moment. Now, Leah is upset because she stopped conceiving. So guess what she does? The text doesn't say she has a long talk with God about her feelings. Instead, she gives Jacob her servant, Zilpah. Zilpah conceives and has Gad. Leah says, "Good fortune has come." Zilpah conceives again and has Asher. Leah says, "Happy am I. Women call me happy." Are y'all following? I'll take your silence as approval and continue. So we get a little side story in the mix. The oldest Reuben finds mandrakes in the field and brings them to his mother, Leah. All right, we need to talk about mandrakes for a sec, y'all. This is one of those, wait, what? Moments in the story. So what's the deal here with mandrakes? Well, mandrakes are a plant, as you can imagine, kind of odd looking, honestly. Low to the ground, broad leaves, and roots that sometimes look vaguely human-esque, which, as you can imagine, didn't help their reputation. But here's why they matter. In the ancient world, mandrakes were believed to be connected to love and desire and fertility. Some people even call them love apples. They smelled sweet, they looked unusual, and over time they picked up this reputation, almost like a natural fertility aid. So when they show up in Jacob's story, this isn't random. Because now we're in the middle of a family already filled with tension, wives competing, longing for children, trying to secure love, identity, and significance. And suddenly, there's a plant that people believe can help exactly that. So yes, this moment might feel a little strange to us, but to them, this was loaded, emotional, desperate, and honestly, a little human. Welcome to Jacob's family. So Rachel tells Leah, "Tell Reuben to give me some of his mandrakes." And Leah's like, "You're joking, right? You take my husband, and now you want my son's mandrakes?" And Rachel responds, "Look, give me some mandrakes. You can lie with Jacob." So Leah says, "Done." Leah conceives a 5th son. Say it with me. Yisachar. Okay, fine. Issachar. Then Leah conceives a 6th son and says, "Now for sure my husband will pay attention to me." Oh, my heart for her. And she names him Zevulun. I think that's way more fun to say than Zebulun. Is that how we say it in English? Zebulun? Then it ends with Leah birthing Dinah, who has her own interesting story. Okay, so let's recap our recap for a second. So Leah comes first, 6 sons and a daughter, Reuben, Simon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah. She's working hard. And then Rachel, Jacob's true love, struggles to get pregnant, but eventually she gives him Joseph, the dreamer, favorite son, coat of many colors, and later Benjamin, her youngest, born at a heavy cost because Rachel dies giving birth to him. But anyhow, then there are maidservants. Bilhah, Rachel's maid, gives Jacob Dan and Naphtali. So that was a hybrid. Naphtali. It's so hard for me to do and not do the Hebrew. Naphtali. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, adds Gad and Asher to the mix. Okay. Oh my goodness, y'all. I've been saying Leah, haven't I? Oh my God. Okay. I have a friend named Leah and not Leah, but in the Bible, it's actually Leah. But I'm not going to go back and fix this and edit it out. So if I say Leah, just know I mean Leah. Okay. So Jacob ends up with 12 sons, 12 men who will become the tribes of Israel, and one daughter, Dinah. All right, take a breath. Family drama? Check. Chaos, love, rivalry, hope, tragedy? Absolutely. And yes, it all starts here, with birth, names, and mischief sprinkled in. So throughout these 20 years in Haran, the Lord blesses everything Jacob touches, and Laban sees it. Laban has grown rich, while Jacob has labored for him all these years. The trickster Yaakov has been tricked. Not for 5 years, not for 10, but for 20 years. And Jacob has had enough. He flees his uncle Laban. Laban pursues him, but God warns Laban in a dream not to harm Jacob. A covenant is made, witnesses are called. You don't touch me, I don't touch you. There's a truce. All right, I super simplified that here, but the point is this. God's plan cannot be contained by distance, by family schemes, or by human cunning. Jacob must return to the place of promise, back to the land, back to the God he first encountered. But there's a perceived obstacle, a lingering fear, because after 20 years of absence, he's going to meet up with his twin, who he wronged multiple times, Esau. Genesis 32, 1-2 says, Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's camp. So he called the name of the place Mahanaim. So, and this is me interjecting, after leaving Laban behind, Jacob keeps moving. And then something surprising happens. He encounters a group of angels. He sees them and says, This is the camp of God, and names the place Mahanaim, which literally means 2 camps. Why 2 camps? Well, scholars have debated this for centuries. Some think it's the angels plus Jacob's family. Others wonder if it reflects the messengers Jacob sent to meet Esau, or even the memory of Laban's camp. What is clear, though, is this. Just like at Bethel, when God first appeared to him in a dream, Jacob experiences divine protection through these angelic visitors. They are like God's unseen traveling companions, watching over him as he prepares to face Esau. Notice this too. These angels don't speak. There's no message, no instruction. Their presence alone is enough. Just as at Bethel, their silent presence signals that Jacob is not alone. God's promise is still with him, even outside the land of Canaan, which is exactly what Jacob needed at this moment. And there's a sense of movement here too. The Hebrew word for camp implies a temporary mobile setup, not a permanent temple, but a shelter along the journey. God's protection isn't fixed. It follows Yaakov wherever he goes. Sounds a bit like a flaming fire leading a group of his descendants who would dwell in camps later, doesn't it? So as Jacob watches the angels and names the place Mahanaim or Mahanaim, he recognizes something profound. Whatever comes next, whether reunion, conflict, or blessing, he is under God's care. He is not facing Esau or the future or even his own fears alone. So continuing to verse 3, it says, And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, or Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord, in order that I may find favor in your sight. Okay, so Jacob has prepared for Esau. He's planned, he's prayed, he's divided everything in multiple camps, just in case. His moves are essentially planned out, preparing himself for what is to come. But there comes a point when God says no more to our scheming and plotting and striving, a point where he must humble us. At this point, Jacob is thinking about Esau. But this really isn't a story about escaping Esau, unknown to Jacob. It's about facing something far greater, because before Jacob can face his brother, he has to face God. And that night, he's left alone. And that is where I am gonna leave us, a cliffhanger in the night. All right, Now, the good news is you don't have to wait for me to know what happens next. We've got Bibles that are filled with spoiler alerts. But next time, we are going to discover together some things in Jacob's new name that most have never heard before and uncover more as to why, oh, why God would choose Yaakov. Y'all, there is so much here. You got to trust me in this. So here's the plan, or at least what I think the plan is. Kind of like Jacob, right? I make my plans, but we'll see what I actually do or what actually happens. So the next episode, we either finish Jacob's story, his name became Israel, or we're going to take a quick detour into a really meaningful conversation I had with a good friend of mine about social media and how it's shaping our image, how we present ourselves, our clothing, our thoughts, and all that's in between. It was truly an amazing interview, and I'm super excited to share it with y'all. But we'll see where we land. So until then, may your week be filled with the joys of much sleep, good books, good company, and peace. And as always, know that you have value, were created for unique purpose, and are deeply loved by God. Ma salem ve'leitrot. We'll chat soon.